Welcome to the Grapplers Academy, episode, what's about 64 now, I think. One of those, finally got my laptop sorted, so we will be getting the audio up to Spotify. So those who are audio only, you're going to have a nice little backlog of things to catch up on.
Be like a 10 episode drop or something, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be like just, the servers would be like, what's going on?
Christmas come early.
Yeah. Bit of an interesting week in the UFC, wasn't there? You had Islam Makhachev with his finish on Dan Hooker.
Yep.
Only saw the highlight and the finish. Hooker was protesting, wasn't he, at the end of the fight because he didn't tap, he said.
Did it? Yeah, how did that go down? So he didn't tap, but...
I heard there was a vocal thing for him though.
The old Vinny Mangalish.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Ref stopped it. I don't really think it was a bad stoppage. If the sort of owl scream is true, because at least he gets to walk on with an arm that's attached and no longer like with Frank Mir and Nogueira happened.
The verbal tap thing is an interesting debate, isn't it? Because like sometimes something hurts and you might just like let out a bit of a noise that could be considered a verbal tap, but it's just caught you by shock.
Yeah.
But you don't really. It's a weird one, isn't it? Because I know people who've done it in the gym or like even done it yourself sometimes. Where you're like, like it's just come on tight quick, but you're still working your way out of it. Or even in that time that it's gone on quick, you've made a little bit of an adjustment. I don't know, for the UFC, verbal taps.
I think going off the history of some of the fights where you look at the Gray Maynard and your, I don't know why that fighter's name's left me, Frankie Edgar. That fight, he was pretty much out on his feet and they let it continue. There's been countless occasions of fights like that, so you can sort of almost argue that I think the verbal tap would have to be quite significant for it to stop, because like you saying there, you've got to do it yourself in training where you let out a little like something vocal as something catches you by surprise, but also it can happen from frustration as well.
Yeah.
So like if you've been caught in a submission, you kind of like just grunt out of frustration because you shouldn't have been caught in that. It doesn't mean you're going to tap to it, it doesn't mean that you're not going to escape from it.
Unless you specifically say tap.
Yeah.
Then maybe it shouldn't count as a verbal tap.
Or like a blood-curdling scream.
Yeah. I think you got like Jimenez with that heel hook, and he made quite a sound, didn't he? And that was that. Did he tap as well at the same time, or did he call it on that as a verbal tap?
I'm not too sure. I'd have to, because you're talking about the couch. Yeah. I've still not got around to finishing that tournament, to be fair. But I think, if someone puts a heel hook on and they let out a bit of a noise, again, it's going to depend on how loud it is. If it's a sort of bit of a frustrated, damn it, then maybe let it continue. I think it's probably on the referee's call there, and
I mean, I think most like the professional referees, you'd like to think are of a good enough standard that they can look at a submission in live action and think like, yeah, that's pretty serious.
Yeah.
If he makes any noise, it is worthwhile a verbal tap, or even if it looks like it's going to break, or if it breaks, the referee should stop the fight from that point of view. You'd like to think that they've got enough knowledge to know whether it is or it isn't at that level of danger with it.
Yeah.
But you know that some of the referees don't look like they have that level of knowledge on the grappling side of things. Standing side of stuff's easy to make out. If somebody's out on their feet clearly, then it's an easy stoppage. Or if somebody's just getting hammer fisted on the floor, then that's an easy stoppage. But sometimes it's a bit blurry with the subs as to whether something's on or something's dangerous or not. And you've got to look at the higher level stuff. It's always going to filter down into the lower levels and the amateurs. And if you set a precedent at the higher standard, then it's kind of going to be picked up by everybody below, isn't it? So it is kind of important how you lay out the rules with it, because everyone's going to adopt it.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to. I think they probably do it all by the referee's discretion, don't they? Because everything is going to be situational. Like, I think the Dan Hooker one was a good stoppage because he was pretty much taken on the back of his own head, and that Kimura was not being let up, and it was only getting further and further round. So the referees probably saved him shoulder surgery. I can't think of any instances where there's been a bad stoppage with a similar situation. There's been loads of bad stoppages, but personally can't think of any bad stoppages where it's been a similar kind of some sort of verbal tap or verbal noise being made and the referee stopped it.
I can think of plenty of submissions that have been put on to the point where the liver's snapped and you wish it would have just stopped earlier.
Yeah.
Because nobody really wants to see that, do they?
No.
Like, you know, everyone's like, oh, the highlight knockouts and all that sort of stuff's good to watch, and it is good to watch, but you know you don't really want to see it.
No.
And equally, you don't really want to see somebody's leg getting snapped back, or remember Cerrone snapped Mike Perry's forearm on that inverted armbar. And you're out for a long time. You know, you've lost. The referee could have either stopped it or you could have tapped. You know, you want to stay in the fight because it's an important fight. You're going to make more money if you win, but you know it's that versus you're going to be out with a career-changing injury.
Yeah.
Especially if it's something like a shoulder with a Kimura. It's funny because Kimuras and omoplatas are just as dangerous as the leg lock game, but nobody thinks about it that way.
I'd probably argue even more, so like a bit more dangerous. Like, obviously nobody wants to be off their feet and they can't walk if they're that the ACL blown from a heel hook, but the rehab and the process to recovery is much more simple for a knee than it is for the shoulder. If you get your shoulder joint ripped out, you've got the socket around the actual head of the humerus and all the ligaments attaching to that, all the tendons attaching to that. For anybody that's had a shoulder injury in the past, it's a recurring injury. Whereas you've seen people come back in NFL, MMA, football, basketball with pretty severe knee injuries from like ACL tears and like the non-contact ones where you sort of turn the corner and your ACL snaps, kind of like the same mechanisms similar to a heel hook where planted the foot, their body's turned but their foot stayed where it is.
It's exactly a heel hook, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the rehab, because it's such unfortunately a common sports injury, the process of rehab for it and the way that they perform surgery on it is much more like practiced. And physios and surgeons have got a lot more experience with that, and the recovery does seem to be a lot quicker.
Yeah.
With those, the other thing about the shoulders as well is it's such a difficult area to get blood flow to, just makes it a long recovery.
Yeah.
Any even small niggling shoulder injury can last a fucking long time, can't it?
Usually a lifetime sometimes, because everyone falls victim to it's feeling better, I'm gonna stop doing my rehab exercises. Everyone, like, I know I'm a bad one for it. Oh, I don't need to do my little stabilisation exercises anymore, my shoulder's feeling great. Land funny on it once, I should have stopped doing it.
Yeah. And this kind of all ties into another point as well in the gym. Don't be so egotistical that you don't tap to something that's going to fucking injure you in training.
Yeah.
Like, and you might, and it depends who you go with as well, because like some of your training partners might be nice to you and kind of hang around there when you know full well you should be tapping, but not really rag it on. And if you get used to that, and if you're being stubborn or something, there's a difference between them hanging around there and giving you an opportunity to work out, or if they're trying to tap you and you know you should tap, versus being stubborn and just trying to fight it out when they could quite easily break it.
Yeah.
Because you do that against somebody who's nice or more experienced or not trying to hurt you, and yeah, you can get away with it. But if you're building a bad habit of doing that, and you come up against somebody who just wants to finish, they're just going to fucking rip it off.
Yeah. And
you reinforced a bad habit there, and now you're injured for a long time, and you can't train, and you might have a problem that carries on with you for the rest of your training career.
Well, I'm like sort of knowing your training partners of when to tap, like sort of early at the right point, or you've got more time to tap because they're not going to wrench a submission on. Because, like, for me, depending on the intensity of the round, if I, for example, catch an armbar, I'll keep the arm and I'll have it in the vulnerable position where you can finish it, but I'm not putting the pressure through because I'm either with somebody who's like a lower, less experienced, and you can sort of see arm bars or that specific submission's an area for them to improve. So you kind of like, I'm going to give them the opportunity to work through different escapes, and just sort of give them time to process it and almost kind of backtrack over the decisions they made to end up in that position. Or I want to see how you're going to react so I can get my next step, and then my next step, and then my next step. So when you are with somebody who knows how to defend and they are going to get to the almost full extension but they have an escape from there, you kind of almost want to gauge that response so you can formulate your sort of follow-up attacks from there as well.
Yeah, definitely. We talked about that quite in depth before, haven't we? I'm just thinking about something that I do when I'm rolling with like maybe people who are closer to beginners, or depends really. But sometimes people tap when I've got no intention of finishing them, and I'll say, just carry on, I'm not going to tap you. And I don't know whether that's reinforcing a bad habit because they think that everybody's going to do that or not. I'm just thinking about it out of my head right now. Like, is that actually a bad thing to do?
I don't know. I'm quite a fan of catch and release, especially during warm-up rounds and that sort of flow round where you're practicing getting the submission or getting the transition, catching it, releasing, and then continuing. Because then it can kind of simulate if the person who put the submission on escapes and they're scrambling up for the top position.
Ties in with what you were just saying about having the next moves onto the position, doesn't it? But like, you know, getting them in, let's say you've got them in a Kimura or something like that, and you like, and you go to tap, and you just go, yeah, I'm not going to tap you, I'm not going to sub you, see if you can work out from here, and let's see where we end up. And it's definitely more for them than it is for me to work their way out of the submission, but then the round gets to continue.
I think that trust probably comes with your experience and your rank, and even your rank and pecking order in the gym as well, like, because they may know that they're not going to get the opportunity with belts that are lower or less, grapplers that are less experienced than you, but they're going to get that with you. So then when they roll with you, they kind of trust that you're not going to smash them up because no one's going to really benefit from that. Whereas they kind of know going against someone less experienced and a bit more hectic, they've got to be a bit more on it and tap in at the appropriate times and reset them.
Yeah, that's a good thing about having a gym where you've got different levels on the mat as well, isn't it? Because you want those rounds where you can be the person who's a bit more dominant in the match, and get the opportunity to work on stuff that you're working on in a more live drilling environment. You're always going to have that guy who you have a scrap with, and it's always, you know, you're at an even level. And it's pretty much go, you're on your A game with them. Like, you don't work much B game with them.
No.
And then if even better, if you've got people who are above you in terms of the skill level, and you can have a good roll with them, and they might not smash you, but like if you know, if you need it a little bit, they can put the pressure on you and make you work out those positions that most people maybe aren't putting you in, and you get an opportunity. Like, that's the why it's so good being a beginner in jiu-jitsu, because you're getting smashed on everybody. And every session is a learning session.
Oh, 100%. And you can sort of see where, like, you have the conversation, don't you, where they kind of say, I'm not progressing, I'm making this mistake, I'm making that mistake, I'm getting caught in this submission by X person. And you say to them, well, for starters, you recognise the mistakes you're making. That's progress. And are you making those mistakes less often? If yes, great, you're making more progress. If the answer's no, why not? Can you start working on stopping those mistakes? And if they're constantly getting beaten by X person, that person could be one of the better players in the gym. It's not a bad thing to get beaten by them all the time. It's giving you exposure to the bad positions and exposure to more knowledge of the mistakes you're making.
Yeah.
And I've seen so many people's defences go through the roof from being on the receiving end of an ass kicking week in, week out, and they become untappable.
Yeah.
They may not dominate around positionally, but every submission you throw at them, they're going to have an option to get out of that. And there's a couple of lads at Hive that are like that, where their submission defence and positional defence is really up there, and trying to find submissions, trying to catch submissions, and even sometimes trying to maintain a dominant position is becoming, or is, an absolute battle.
Yeah.
And that works great for the more experienced players as well, because they're getting experience with someone who's great at escaping, and they have to try and keep them pinned or keep the dominant positions.
Yeah, it's good. It does work both ways, and one thing that you'll quite often hear from more experienced players as well is like, I have to put myself in a bad position where the person can start in a stronger position and then I work my way out of it, rather than you did your A game and you got put there.
Yeah.
Kind of a different thing, isn't it? So the battle for more experienced guys is going out of the way to either find people who can beat them, be better than them in a role, so they're getting that opportunity to learn, or you have to, with your less experienced training partners, put yourself in a bad position. So really, if you're in a bad position, it's a double win, because you get in that time that those more experienced players aren't. And I think that probably one of the biggest rates of period of development in jiu-jitsu is where you've got a good level of competence, but you've still got a lot of people who can beat you. So you're getting a lot of different looks on how to defend different things. And if you're getting that really big broad spectrum, then your game's going up quick, and you're getting a lot of different looks. Like, let's say you're the guy in the gym, you've got a good Kimura, and the Kimura is the only thing that you do, and you can do it to everybody that you roll with, and that's basically how every round goes. Like, the only thing you're getting good at is Kimuras, which is great because you're getting a really good Kimura, but what happens when somebody else sticks you in it? You might not even know how to defend your own sub very well.
Yeah.
Or let's say you just get put on your back in side control and you've got no experience of being there when you go against a player who's the same experience as you or better, and now you're fucked because you've not spent any of your training time in bad positions and you don't know how to escape them. Whereas the blue belt, who you smash every week, has got 20 different escapes to your game.
Yeah.
It's tough, and it's that cycle that's ideal to have if you've got those multiple levels in the gym. But the higher you go up the ladder, the harder it is to try and find that.
Oh, definitely. I think that kind of fits nicely with discussion that I had recently that just popped into my head, was about the Khabib instructional that's out on Fanatics. I've heard and seen quite a few reviews where they're kind of saying that it's not really showing anything groundbreaking, but then for me that kind of shows the strength in having solid fundamentals. Like, you don't see him doing any of the spinny, flashy stuff for the gram. It's positional, not getting swept, attacking for positions once he's solidified the position, attacking submissions once he's got the position, and just transitioning through the strong, solid positions. There's no taking risks, which I don't know what point I was getting to with that, but which for me is kind of like, you don't have to be like a specialist in the fancy, spinny, having a million different entries into the Kimura or the heel hook or the armbar, where it's all this spinny and you're bypassing so many other submissions because it was cool for a post. It's get your foundations nailed.
I think another point on that as well is purple belt matches are really exciting because there's a lot of wild stuff going on in the match, and they're fun to watch from a spectator point of view as well. But when you look at what's a black belt do differently, or those high level black belts, it's all tight, isn't it? All very tight, all very fundamental. They don't want to give anything away because they know if they do something a bit flash, then they're exposing themselves to the other player locking it down and starting to climb up and keep everything locked in. And I think that's the difference when you start to become more advanced in your game. It's probably at the beginning you're learning the fundamentals in those first 2 years, and then you might start playing around with more flash stuff in that middle period, where you're getting more and more techniques and you're starting to learn a big broad spectrum of what you can do and have fun with it. But then, and you pretty much speak to any black belt, they always say they go back to the fundamentals and getting them tight. And you roll with a black belt who's solid and has got a tight game, and they're a fucking nightmare because they don't give anything away. It's all slow and tight, and it just feels like they're crawling up you like an anaconda, taking the life out of you. But it's nothing flash. No. And you look at like who's arguably one of the best examples of that, and renowned as being one of the best gi and no gi players ever is Roger Gracie. Yeah. And it's a very fundamental game, but it's fucking solid.
Yeah. Like, very, very hard to find flaws in it.
Yeah.
And it's all balance, weight distribution, pinning, isolating, finding the submission.
And he is an exceptional athlete in the jiu-jitsu community as well, with his height and his size and his athleticism. But I think that's quite interesting. I don't know if you talked about this before. Do you remember we were speaking about Roger Gracie's training when he moved to the UK?
Yeah.
He just had all beginners to train with and nobody really experienced. Maybe he had to go up to like Birmingham to train with Braulio, but that was like his experience rounds that he'd get in. And then he dominated at Worlds by only just training with blue belts. So like we're saying, it's not only, you don't have to have a gym full of black belts to develop a good game.
No. And it's like, recently I'd like saying, going back to the fundamentals, I've been revisiting the first foundational escapes for the positions that you kind of learn in your first year, but tightening up the details, making them a lot more specific, and getting the small details that you kind of go back to when you understand the big picture. You can describe that. It got described to me as start with the big strokes and the small details after.
Yeah.
And I'm noticing a lot of the small details within these really fundamental basic escapes make the world of difference. Like, everyone knows how to get out of side control, but like the technique we looked at last week of putting the knee on the hip and then moving first, for me that was like, mine just went, and it's massively increased my ability to fend off side control.
Yeah.
Even like just looking at the theory of the elbow-knee connection and creating frames and barriers rather than trying to scramble up and spin out everything.
I was having this conversation with my coach last night as well, and we were talking about, it's interesting the way that you learn jiu-jitsu, you learn techniques specifically, and it kind of makes sense why you do that, because you've got to build up that big picture and broad understanding of what it is. But when you go back and look at it later, or when you look at it in more detail, the fundamental concepts of what jiu-jitsu is and what makes all the techniques work are pretty much all the same. It's space, taking away space, connections, frames.
Yeah.
There's a lot of triangles in jiu-jitsu as well, like the Illuminati. But it's the same thing everywhere, isn't it? But it'd be interesting to try and teach a person jiu-jitsu from the beginning only with concepts and see how they could apply them in different situations. Now, I don't think they do it as well at the beginning, but the sooner you can get those concepts into somebody's head as a beginner with the techniques, like you're saying, show them the technique, but then go back and layer it with those finer details of the fundamentals and the concepts of it, then they can apply those in different situations rather than just being, this is the side control escape. Oh, actually, this works from 10 different other positions if I use the same theories. But I don't think you can learn like that right at the beginning.
No, I think at the beginning you kind of need to sort of get your feet wet and learn techniques to be able to have that exchange of role with your partners, and then from there you kind of develop an understanding of, don't want to be here, this is where this is the position I need to get to, this is my favourite submission, here's how I pass, here's how I move. Basically trying to develop the good habits, and then I think once you've developed those, you then start looking into the why, and that gives you a great understanding. I think that once you get that why, after you've got the base knowledge, really helps expand and progress you a lot more than, because I think, because if we went to like a random like dancing, like it's all like, it's very similar with concepts, and you move in certain ways and things that I'd imagine. I'm not a dancer, far from it. But it's all movement, and to start off you kind of just need to know, here's how to move and here's certain sequences, and then further on you probably learn the history of a certain sequence and why something's placed in a certain place, and then you're like, oh yeah, but that can match onto that performance there, so I'm going to bring that over here, and then everything starts to cross-reference, and then you start learning, having a great understanding of what you're doing.
Yeah, it's like I say, it's building those layers, isn't it? I think it'd be, and it's the context of the why as well, because if you just showed the concept, let's say for example, it wouldn't necessarily have a context in rolling. So if you stick it into a rolling environment and all you know is elbow to knee connection,
yeah,
and you're like, fuck, I'm trying to pass the guard, how does it? So this
trying to pass like that.
It's coming in like a fucking turtle shell. It's a great concept, but it doesn't fit in that scenario. So you're much better off getting reps and getting the muscle memory in of a handful of techniques to give you even like a sequence of techniques. Like I've done with beginners course in the past, where it's like, we're just going to learn a flow essentially, learn a kata of back escape, guard pass, blah blah blah, and then you end up taking the back. That's a kata of moves essentially. Yeah. Like you do in karate, which everybody laughs at.
We're taking it back.
We're taking it back kata for jiu-jitsu. It works. But then by the time you've done that for 4 weeks, like it has a context, and like, oh shit, I'm at side control. Okay, now the elbow and the knee thing makes sense, because every time I get it, the guy's just getting his guard back. Why the fuck is that? It's like, oh, he's got this space. I need to take that space away. And then you can go back in the layer. And as a coach, you'll see that as well. Like people will be getting the big broad strokes, and then you go, right, you can tighten that up a little bit if you do this or you do that, depending on what the technique is. Yeah. And then when you're doing that with your students as well, that's when they have a little bit of a light bulb moment. They're like, oh shit, right, that's why it works.
It's always funny when you see them have that light bulb moment as well. Yeah. When like, usually like after a round you've had with them, and you've sort of been like, I've just realised what you're doing, and it's like, enjoy this moment.
I feel like the guy from Kill Bill where he's got the beard.
Yeah. Just step onto the
sign me. Oh, brilliant. What were we actually going to talk about today?
Extra training. Oh yeah, that was it. Because saw on the infamous UK BJJ Underground, a wondrous place of controversial posts and comments and sometimes funny memes. But
you sound like you've got a bunch to know about that today, mate.
Pardon?
You sound like you've got a deeper layer of meaning behind the.
Oh yeah, it's just.
Big fan of the Underground.
I am when there's a lot of trolling, just because I find I can sit there and read. Like I don't go on Facebook often, but when I do, if I see a good thread on the Underground, do you know, my days of stirring have kind of gone a little bit now, just because I'm like 32. I'm one of them where I'll type everything out and then I'll delete afterwards.
Yeah, that was enough for you.
Yeah. Yeah. But
what was the post?
Oh yeah, the posts are alright. Yeah. But like just love watching the trolling stuff. And but yeah, there's a good post on there about what sports and stuff do you do outside of jiu-jitsu. And I found it quite interesting how everybody commented saying I do X, Y and Z because it helps my jiu-jitsu. Not necessarily I do X, Y and Z because I enjoy those as well. Mm-hmm. And it's great to have something else you do to help your main sport, i.e. weightlifting, to help with getting stronger for jiu-jitsu or preventing injuries. But I also recognise, I know that I need it anyway, something else that's completely unrelated, to do as a hobby.
Probably most people's answer to that question would be if you asked them to play FIFA or something.
Yeah.
What do you do different from jiu-jitsu? Play PlayStation.
Yeah.
Bit
of Xbox, switch off.
Which is fine, but it's funny if you flipped it on its head the other way around. It's like, what do you do outside of weightlifting? It's like, I do jiu-jitsu. To hell about weightlifting. Because it makes my grip better. Nobody would answer that ever. It's like, why do you do jiu-jitsu? Yeah, to make my back feel shit, to make my neck feel shit. And it really helps my weightlifting.
I really want to improve the deadlift, so I'm going to go and twist my spine every week.
Yeah, but it's conditioning, isn't it? If you get strong in a compressed position, then you'll be like a coiled spring and the deadlift will just fly up and your grip will be so strong from controlling the gi.
But if that spring's rusted, it's just going to snap.
Right, the spring, if we're using the analogy of my back's like a rusty spring that's been twisted the wrong way around and it's like just on the fucking thread of snapping. Or I'm like the slinky dog where there's just no tension there whatsoever. Yeah.
Just getting hung from the window to try to save.
No, that's not true. Deadlifting and jiu-jitsu is an amazing combination.
100%, especially on the same day, maxing out 7 days a week.
Yeah, go as heavy as you can at every opportunity. And if you can, take up fucking CrossFit as well while you're at it. If you really wanted to be fucked, the best combination would be do CrossFit and do jiu-jitsu. I can't think of a combination that would leave you feeling worse.
CrossFit in the AM, jiu-jitsu in the PM, 7 days a week.
No, because the way to do it for CrossFit would be that, and this, you just pray to God that nobody in the head of CrossFit gets into jiu-jitsu, because it'll be, you do 1 rep max AMRAP snatches for time, and then you have to go and fight a black belt, and then you come back and do 500 metres on the ski erg, and then you're back in fighting a purple belt.
And then from there, just to mix it up, because CrossFit Games, you don't know what you're walking into.
Yeah.
Final rounds are bare.
CrossFitters would have an issue with that for animal cruelty reasons.
We're vegan, we can't fight animals.
Imitation there.
Is it a fair? Because it's not very fair.
Actually, funny story on that. One of my mates was out on a walk, and the weather's just been shit this past weekend, hasn't it? He said he was walking down the path, and he had this crack behind him and where he'd just been. And the fucking tree trunk, the size of like a punching bag, had just fallen down. Would have killed him. Would have killed him, and he was walking with his dogs as well if he was just a couple of seconds slower. But the irony is he's a vegan, so the headline would have been "Vegan killed by trees." And I said if it wasn't, then I would have pestered the newspapers until they changed it.
Just start your own headlines.
Yeah. But no, yeah, you don't have to only do stuff outside of jiu-jitsu because it helps you jiu-jitsu. Do it because it's fun.
Yeah.
And because also if you're only doing the same thing over and over again, you get burnt out.
Yeah.
You don't want to get to a point where you don't enjoy jiu-jitsu. So do something that's enough different away from it that you actually enjoy both separately, and they don't fatigue each other out mentally and physically as well. I've injured many times, you've been injured many times, and it's no fun when you can't do both.
No.
But if the two things that you're doing accumulating that much fatigue on your body and you're not getting an opportunity to recover well enough, and eventually after 3 months of that you're broken and now you can't train for 4 weeks, well now you're stupid.
Yeah.
Speaking about myself specifically, at the moment, you're out of training, and that's time when you're not doing anything and you sat at home, you're like, I want to get back on the mats.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's hard to find a balance sometimes though, isn't it, as well? It's especially when you enjoy something so much. Well, I saw on that thread, I did see quite a few answers where it's kind of like walking, nothing to do with jiu-jitsu, and just sort of, for me, it's one of the best things for clearing your head and recharging the batteries. Couple other things, saw a few people put bouldering down as well, which I think I love bouldering. When I've done it, it's been really fun, and I'm not doing it when I've done it because it's going to help my jiu-jitsu. I've done it because it's something different. Whereas there was a few answers where it's bouldering or climbing helps with grip strength and core strength for jiu-jitsu. And it's
so does no jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. So does weightlifting. So does gymnastics.
And again, it's a similar thing where, yes, that's true, But if you then got to look at the overall fatigue stimulus across the week. If you're doing jiu-jitsu on a Monday and you're going bouldering on a Tuesday, your body's got no time to have a break from that movement. It's grip. Wednesday, more grip. Friday, more grip.
We're also looking at the mental fatigue as well. And like, if there's no enjoyment factor, you're not going to get that, like the kick of endorphins. Like, you might enjoy it at first because it's something new, but if you're only going because it helps your jiu-jitsu, it's going to become very, very stale after a while.
Well, I think that on the flip side of what we were just talking about, we like weight training. Some people hate weight training.
Yeah.
And it's a real chore for them to come to the gym. And obviously there are big benefits to doing it for improving your jiu-jitsu if that's what you're trying to do. But if you hate it,
I'd say don't do it.
Don't do it. Do something different.
Yeah. Unless you're like a competitor and you're trying to make it in the big leagues and you hate weightlifting, in that case you're gonna have to just suck it up, because what your enjoyment and your goals doesn't necessarily always have to align. You just have to do what's necessary to get to that end goal. But if you're a casual practitioner, you just enjoy doing it, you maybe compete once a year because of it's something to do. Weightlifting isn't a necessity. So if you're just purely doing weightlifting for jiu-jitsu and you hate the weights room, just don't do it. Find something else.
Where do you reckon the biggest demographic of jiu-jitsu players falls between, outside of the gym, cardio, weight training, or yoga or something like that? Or 4, none. I think the answer is probably 4, none.
Yeah.
I think a lot of MMA guys and probably jiu-jitsu guys as well seem to be obsessed with cardio, to the point where they do so much cardio that they're actually taking away from some of the time that they could have done some strength training.
Yeah.
I think a lot of, there's a common misconception with combat athletes is that doing strength training is going to make you slow and bulky. We talked about this before. It's such a wrong misconception. It's like, no, you're going to get more agile, quicker, and you're not trying to be a bodybuilder. There's a big difference between trying to be a bodybuilder and getting strong. There's a lot of strong people who aren't overly muscular.
Yeah.
And yoga is probably one of those things that most people should do. There are a select people, group of people that do it in the jiu-jitsu community, but I'd say that's probably the lower percentage of the pie of people and what they do.
Yeah, I'd probably go with that. I think it's slowly growing though. But I have to agree with you, like, everyone's obsessed with cardio. Like, don't get me wrong, having great conditioning will give you better time on the mat, so you'll probably notice a good amount of improvement. But you're gonna be either stagnating your strength progress. So if that player who always manages to outmuscle you, he's always gonna do it if you don't get yourself stronger. Or find a way around it, but the athleticism will tend to win if the skill level's the same. It's just finding, like, if you don't want to weight train, there's loads and loads of ways to get a similar stimulus without having to step into a weights room.
There's so many different training methodologies, it really doesn't matter. Like, unless you want to be super specific with your training goals, like, I want to get stronger at this particular movement, you can literally do anything. You can get a sandbag.
Yeah.
You can literally do anything, it doesn't matter. Like, just pick your training methodology and do the one that you enjoy. You're going to get stronger and you're going to get fitter.
Like,
it literally doesn't matter.
One of the lads at Hive, he started doing kettlebells over the lockdown, and he said that since he's been doing that, he's felt stronger, he's had better cardio, his injuries, the aches and pains that he's had, have pretty much gone. And he says all he does is a 25-30 minute kettlebell routine, and he's just slowly increasing the weights of the ones that he's got, but he doesn't enjoy the weights room. He said that he doesn't have time for the weights room as well, whereas he can do a kettlebell routine at home and get the stimulus he needs to meet his goals, and he enjoys it, which is the key thing.
Well, I'll tell you now, that's much healthier than what I do and than what a lot of people do, because like, yeah, I'll train in the weight room hard because I enjoy it.
Yeah.
But it's certainly, you know, I couldn't sit down there and argue with you that it was for a health benefit.
Yeah.
What I do certainly doesn't improve my health if you're looking at it from that point of view, because it just beats your body up.
Yeah.
You know, don't know what you're talking about, but if they're just doing it for general health and they feel stronger, that's amazing because they feel great. They're actually improving the way that they feel, not feeling like shit from doing the training and trying to look for ways to recover from it. That kind of is the active recovery in a way, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's giving them that side benefit of getting stronger. And they're not getting a mental burnout with it either.
No.
You've got to, and I think a lot of people, this ties in with the reason why I think a lot of people do jiu-jitsu and sports like that anyway, is from the mental health benefit aspect of it. And, you know, you quite hear it get bounced around a lot that going to jiu-jitsu is the way that people kind of like cleanse and refresh their mental health. And it's great because you've got all those training partners around there and you can have a laugh while you're doing it as well. But I think like the one thing that I probably should try and do better is with yoga. Let's say, for example, not do yoga for the reason of the stretch necessarily, but look at it more of a relax and something for the mind rather than for the body.
Oh, definitely. It's like, I say back onto the weight training, like for maybe a lot of practitioners who do weight training train to get better for jiu-jitsu, whereas like you train weights because you like being strong.
Yeah, separate from jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. I lift weights, same thing. I want to feel stronger, and also there's the aesthetic side of it as well. Like I enjoy looking bigger.
Yeah.
So they're the two reasons that I weight train. If as a byproduct to get better jiu-jitsu or it helps my jiu-jitsu game, then great, that's fantastic. But I started weight training because I was an overweight kid and I had zero fitness and wanted to look better and feel stronger, and those reasons haven't really changed. It's just that now I've got a sport that kind of helps me achieve that goal and can sometimes give me a bit of direction in my training if I'm not sure what I want to do.
Yeah, sometimes it's easy to get into a period with your training if you've not got a strict plan. Like you kind of feel like you're just treading water for a bit, and then you can just reflect it back on what you're doing and like, right, okay, I'll kind of switch up the gears and put it a little bit more to jiu-jitsu for a time being, until I feel like I'm more motivated to do what I was doing before, or it maybe even changes your goals long term.
Yeah.
But the top and bottom of it is if you're smart, just do something that improves your general health.
Yeah.
If you want to just have it, do what you enjoy for a long time, do it with a point of view of health in mind, not with an ego in mind and trying to crush yourself at every opportunity.
Yeah.
Because you can't redline your body forever.
No, that's when you gotta break.
Yeah. But yeah.
If you agree with us, disagree with us, or have any other things you want to add to this conversation, drop a comment below and let us know what you think. It'd be great to sort of hear some feedback on what we've been saying and maybe another perspective that me and Bob might not have looked at. Make sure you hit us up on social media, Bonafide PT, coached by Si, the Grapplers Academy, and we'll see you next week.